Steven, are you okay? Steven?
Why do we agree to do this? That movie was so bad. It was so bad.
I mean, it was okay.
It was so bad, Corbin. It was so bad.
So you guys are probably wondering what's going on. We just got done watching Halloween 3. Steven, I can tell, unfortunately did not like this film. Halloween 3 is a really interesting film. It is the first film, and I think last film, to not have Michael Myers. They decided after the second one, obviously, the spoilers for the second one, Michael Myers dies at the end of the second one. So they really had no idea where to bring this third one. They probably shouldn't have even made a third one. So with this, they actually decided that they were going to take the Halloween franchise into an anthology route. So what that means is they wanted to create other Halloween movies that had totally different stories. So basically like Twilight Zone or Black Mirror, just different stories after each film. So this was the first attempt at trying to make that. So Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, is a very interesting film because
That's one way to put it.
it's so weird. I kind of like it for its weirdness, but I understand that this is not a very well made film. The acting is atrocious.
The dialogue is atrocious.
Yeah.
The plot is...
It's so weird.
The plot is... It's like an Eric Andre plot, almost. Like, it's...
So, let me... I know we just talked about this, but I need to get my facts straight. So this was directed by Tommy Lee Walrus.
Tommy Lee Walrus.
Hold on. Not Walrus. Not Walrus.
Okay, I'm sorry. We edited that out.
So this film was directed by Tommy Lee Wallace. He was a part of the first Halloween film, but he was the set designer. He was the art director. So that isn't really part of the plot or story or anything like that. And that's cool. I don't really understand why they decided to make him a director.
Yeah, I don't know if he had any... I mean, he's gone on to direct a couple of other things, most notably the 1990 adaptation of Stephen King's It, which makes it even more shocking that he was allowed anywhere near Stephen King's name.
Apparently, okay, so he wrote this movie as well. This
man should not be allowed to vote.
Well, all right, so I actually looked it up, and he did like a couple episodes for The Twilight Zone.
Oh, really?
Which makes sense because obviously we're talking about something that's very anthology oriented.
Yeah.
So what this film is about, and to its credit, it is the closest Halloween film that touches on the holiday. So what it's about is we start with this guy running from these men in business suits, and he is trying to warn the public that something is going down in this town where this business is taking place, this business that's known for making these masks, and he comes across this doctor, and after this guy is killed, the doctor basically is very interested because the guy warns the doctor, like, they're coming, like, they're gonna kill us all. So he gets really interested about what this guy was trying to warn everybody about, so he starts to investigate a little bit. This movie actually showcases the separate days that are in October where, like, Halloween is like a week or two away. They show dates like, oh, this all started on October 23rd and stuff like that.
The commercial kind of counting down, like 5 more days till Halloween.
That's so I saw, unfortunately, this was the first Halloween I ever saw as a kid. I saw this when I was 8.
I feel so bad for you.
I know. My parents were very selective about what I watched, and I guess they didn't really want me watching anything serial killer oriented, which doesn't really make sense because when they rented this movie, they also rented Jeepers Creepers and Wrong Turn. So
they didn't want you to see a slasher movie with Michael Myers, but they were okay with occult Celtic sacrificial rituals involving children, nonetheless.
So they got this movie for we rented this movie, and I watched it
to date ourselves. We got it from Blockbuster.
Yeah, and I remember thinking that this was very weird. And obviously, this movie received very negative reviews at the time when it came out. I believe it was 1982, a year after Halloween 2, which explains a lot because maybe this was like rushed. And the main reason why this received negative reviews was because obviously Michael Myers was not in this film. John Carpenter agreed to produce a third Halloween film if and only it did not have Michael Myers. So it's kind of his fault that this exists. Well, not necessarily.
Don't you dare bring good old John Carpenter's name through the mud with this.
They should have just been done with this franchise.
Yeah.
But he agreed that he would come back if they didn't have this character, Michael Myers, in the film. And I understand where he's coming from, actually, because he wanted to work on a whole lot of other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like this same story nowadays with, like, Christopher Nolan in The Dark Knight. Because he wants to branch out. You know, he's always going to be known as the Dark Knight director, but he's trying to do new things with, like, Interstellar, and the difference is, you know, like, I mean, this was an incredibly ambitious undertaking. You know, you're distancing yourself from something that has made you a ton of money, and completely putting an entirely different spin on it, with a story that is just convoluted to the point of just being... It blows past so bad it's good to just straight, like, you know, why are we even sitting here watching this?
This is insane. This whole movie is insane.
This entire movie, I feel like the best way you could market this is as an ad campaign for why you should never be allowed to do drugs. Like, there's no way a ton of acid didn't go into making this movie. It's got, you know, these mask things that are Celtic ritual things that shoot laser beams into your head that make locusts fly out of your mouth.
Like, is that what it was, locusts?
Yeah, locusts, crickets, snakes.
Yeah.
It's got, you know, freaking robots. It's got, you know, one of those creepy towns. Like, okay, so one thing I do want to talk about is, I feel like this could have been...
amazing.
Amazing. It really could have been. So you got this town, it's like this creepy town where all the people are kind of, you know, robotic. They're welcoming, but there's stuff going on behind the scenes. It's got a very Children of the Corn type feel.
It reminded me of Stranger Things because of the techno synth.
Initially, yes.
Like, and there you can tell that there's some government business oriented things going on. I would not be surprised if, like, the creators of Stranger Things watched this film specifically and was like, oh, we should do this, but better.
But make it good.
Yes, exactly. This is, so there's some weird stuff going on. Like I said, there's this doctor, he comes across, like, this girl whose father was the one who was killed. Which, by the way, I have to talk about that scene where the guy lights himself on fire. Like, the guy who kills the father in the hospital. Amazing. Like, they're taking slasher films and Halloween films to the next level with these explosions. More explosions than, like, Halloween 2. Bigger and better. So, he gets together with this girl, and she really wants to figure out what happened to her father. So, they track down this business, this town, which is really known for these masks. And throughout the movie, you see that these are really, really well-known masks. They are basically, like... the Gucci of Halloween masks. Like, they're really well known.
They show a scene towards the end of, like, you know, children all across the United States, in Los Angeles, New York, and you know different places, major cities around the country, and it's just kind of shows, you know, how widespread this is, especially since now by the time that scene comes, you'll have a little bit of information about how bad this is and how, you know, serious the problem is.
It's a brand.
It's a brand.
So there are so many, like, I don't want to say subtle, because you can tell, like, with how many times the masks are mentioned and the commercials that are surrounding the masks, that whatever is happening has to do with these masks. So they go to this town where these masks are manufactured. Apparently the father owned a store and was selling these masks. I guess he like found out that this business was involved with some really shady stuff. So they track down this business, and they get like a tour or something. They get a tour with a family there. Like there's a mom, dad, and a child. The dad is like owns a store where he sells these masks. So they're with this family and they get a tour of the place. And then there's some really subtle things that they say where they're tampering with the masks for finalizing them, I guess.
It's I can't remember the exact wording for it, but it was basically final assembly or final, inspection, basically. And he's like, well, what's going on in there? He's like, oh, well, we don't let you do that, trade secrets.
It's like chemical oriented.
Yeah, chemical oriented.
Like, first of all, if I'm selling latex masks
that children are going to wear on their heads,
and you're telling me that like you're putting chemical compounds in these masks and I'm selling them, I would want to know what I am selling to the public.
Here, Jimmy, have a mask made out of asbestos. What's the worst that could happen? It's not going to shoot a laser beam through your freaking head.
Oh my god, the special effects in this movie. Oh my god. So, there's another store owner who personally drives to this location to pick up these masks, and she comes across a tampered, broken coin brand that's on these masks, and she's
basically
messing with
their logo, their seal on the back of it.
And she's messing with them in bed, and I kid you not, a laser comes from this branded coin. Okay, so there's a blend of special effects, like practical bloody effects, and this is, I believe, the first Halloween film that also tried to do animated effects. It looks so corny.
It looks like, this came out in, I think, 1982, and by this time Star Wars was a thing. We knew how to do good special effects, and it's like a blue line, and then you just see her face with, like, a hole in it, and her eyeballs popped out, basically. And then just, like, a locust or a cicada or something comes out of her mouth. Because that's what lasers do, right?
They make living bugs come out of people's face. We gotta talk more about that, like, when we talk about the ending. But, so, I want to talk about this, like, main character, who is the Doctor. HR would be on his ass in 2018.
He's a very, very, very discounted Tom Selleck. He's got a little bit of like a Magnum PI look about him, but he's just so. Me Too would be all over.
Yes,
him.
So he spanks.
He spanks like 3 different nurses. He's like,
I wish you were my wife. Like,
he beds this chick whose dad just died.
Yeah. Okay.
And
so they go to this town, and they rent a hotel, and you'd think that like this girl would be like, oh, my father is dead. I need to figure out like, what's going on, and this is 100% my objective right now. She kind of forgets about that for a second and just makes love to this dude. And just
seduces this, like
that's your main thing?
This 40-something-year-old guy, and she's supposed to be like a teenager or something, and then after they've already done the deed, they have some quip about like, oh, well, how old are you? And she's like, oh, I'm old enough.
Wait a minute. How old are you?
Relax. I'm older than I look.
You wanted to ask that, like, at that moment? It's just...
You shouldn't have done it at all! You should have slept in the freaking car!
It's super crazy. It's very hard to be, like, behind this character, because...
He's just not likable as a protagonist.
Yeah,
like, you go through the whole thing. I was watching the whole thing, I was like, gee, I hope he dies. I would love for him to just... get stabbed in the face.
He promises his ex-wife, he's divorced in this film, he promises his ex-wife that he's going to watch his kids are going to come over on this day. He decides, like, out of the blue, that he wants to go to this town to investigate what's going on, because he's curious about it. I guess, but at the same time you made obligations to watch your kids like on this specific day. It's just so hard to like really like this character when like
he's trying to save the children of the world, basically.
Well, he doesn't know that at that point. He's just
doesn't.
curious because like 2 guys died at his hospital. That's it.
Yeah.
I guess you could say that it's more of just it's really hard. It's just hard to be behind this character when he's kind of neglecting his family.
And he flirts with everything with a pulse.
It's no wonder he's divorced.
It's absolutely no wonder.
It's actually like it's hinted that he had like
the movie would have probably been more interesting if he hadn't been divorced, just because it'd been like, let's see what's going on with that.
Yeah, it was actually kind of hinted that he had alcohol problems like prior to the divorce. You can hear the dialogue over the phone like barely, but if you like really listen to it, you can tell like, oh, have you just been drinking again? It's written in there because the ending has to make sense, essentially. Where, let's talk about the ending. So he figures out what's going on. This corporate head business guy explains to him showcases to him by killing a family of 3.
Yeah.
that they are distributing these masks to basically perform human sacrifices. So basically he explains to this doctor that these masks have like a discharge effect when these commercials come on. And I guess they like explode or something and they make the faces of the kids deteriorate and then there's like snakes and
I don't
bugs.
know. So the reason that this happens is because they took one of the panels from Stonehenge, that monument in the United Kingdom.
They stole it.
They basically stole it. And apparently it has magical properties that can do something. Like it's in
Celtic.
one case, in one case it's a laser beam. In one case it's an explosion and it makes bugs and snakes come out of your head. Like, there's no way these guys weren't on a ton of drugs when they made this.
Like I said, they really tried to make this film. I will give this film credit because the first 2 Halloween films are not actually about Halloween. The movies only take place on the night of Halloween. You barely see any kids like trick-or-treating. Like, I don't even think like the first kids in the first film go trick-or-treating. They're just
you
there.
see them because they're out there walking around.
Well, not the kids, like the main kids.
Oh, the main
like you see them in
characters.
costume, but all they're really doing is just like watching movies and eating popcorn.
You see the
and
children
stuff.
doing it at the town.
Like, yeah, you see glimpses of that, but
Yeah.
this film decides to make it all about Halloween, and you see the corporate side of Halloween where there's masks and some kids have to have this certain mask and branding and stuff like that. So I will give the movie that credit. They really tried to connect with the holiday and the culture and stuff like that, and I guess pagan rituals or
Celtic. It goes in. It references the same thing that was mentioned in Halloween 2, the Samhain, that Michael Myers writes on the board.
That cannot be a coincidence.
It has to be a connection between the two, and it's he goes back to like while he's explaining why he's doing what he's doing to the protagonist. He references that Halloween was supposed to be a dark night. It was supposed to be a night of evil, the beginning of the dark season, which was winter. And how basically he doesn't like how it's become so commercialized, and it's supposed to be about, signifying, death and, danger. And it's his way of trying to, I guess, right the wrongs of the world or something like that. He has some throwaway line of like, I didn't choose this, the planets chose it. And it's like in and of itself, I feel like if you had a significantly less ridiculous plot with regard to stealing a massive stone from ancient times in the UK and had significantly better acting and probably better special effects, it would have been a much better film. I mean, the concept of like a town like that is creepy. The concept of, ancient ritual sacrifice, especially involving children, is a terrifying thought, especially for parents.
I'd love to see a Black Mirror episode.
This
about
would
this.
make an amazing Black Mirror episode.
I was telling you, I would love this to be a remake or something. I don't know if
James Wan got his hands on this, it would be amazing.
Yeah, no, for sure. Something I want to talk to you about. So, they end up capturing his teenage girlfriend, or I guess 20-something-year-old girl. I don't know. So he gets her back, and they devise this plan where they blow up the whole facility. There's a bunch of other George Lucas-looking effects.
Yep.
And a circle, and the bad guy gets this really weird FX mask or whatever. I don't even know. There's tons of stuff throughout this film where one of the robots kills the first guy in the beginning, and apparently he ruptures his skull with his hands, but it just looks like a mask over a guy.
And you can tell because you can see lines on the neck.
Yeah. And then they escape. And this doesn't really... This is where I'm this doesn't make sense. So the girl, I don't know if A, she was a robot the entire time, or B, she was captured, they killed her, and made her into a robot.
That's what I think happened, just because... And even if she was a robot, she allowed him to destroy their entire facility before she decides, hey, maybe I should kill this guy. There's just so many stupid things that
I don't get it. So, do you think that she was a robot the entire time? Or...
No, I think it's more plausible that she was captured, killed, and turned into a robot.
Okay.
Which, I mean, even that of itself,
that doesn't make any sense.
Because that's an invasion of the body snatchers type plot, which is, that's a creepy thing to think about, too.
Yeah.
This movie had so many chances to get it right, and didn't hit on any of them.
That's the one part that, I'm going to say that didn't make any sense whatsoever. And then, obviously, he can't really do anything about it. He tries to call, the TV stations.
Yeah.
And they're somewhat listening to him.
Two of them pull it, but the third one does not.
Yeah.
And it does kind of play off at the end of that feeling of helplessness, which is, again, that's kind of a characteristic of a lot of horror movies, is that feeling of, something bad is happening, I'm trying to stop it, but I can't do anything because people won't listen to me. And it's kind of the similar thing to Dr. Loomis in the first and second ones, where, they don't believe him when he's telling them about Michael Myers. And that as well is, a creepy and relatively freaky thing to be experiencing as, a person. And I feel like that... It doesn't make... The film does by no means sticks the landing, but that kind of adds a little bit of an ominous factor to the end of it. But other than that, it's just, there were so many execution errors. The plot had holes big enough to drive a bus through. And it's just poorly executed, poorly written, and it's not a good film.
You could tell that this was... Because this film came out a year after Halloween 2. So you could tell, and you can, just by watching it, you can tell that this was so rushed. Mm-hmm. And even the effects aren't really that good. Because Halloween 2, that movie didn't even come out until 3 years after the original one. This was a year after the second one.
You could tell, because the actors were obviously, B-list people.
They were
hadn't heard of any of them.
Yeah, they're very unprepared, and that's what typically happens with horror franchises a lot, is when you are on a roll with a very successful horror franchise and you want to get into that motion of releasing a movie every year, say the Saw franchise or the Paranormal Activity franchise or just anything like Friday the 13th, just a couple examples. You start to really lose focus on, okay, let's make a good movie, and start to focus on, okay, let's get this finished and distributed.
It becomes more about the money than about the product.
Yeah.
And a lot of these, especially the older slasher film remakes, or not remakes, the sequels, suffered from that, in that they just were making them just to make them. They didn't care if they were good. They weren't caring if they made money. This was the lowest grossing Halloween movie to date, and it still turned a profit. Just because it happened to have the Halloween name attached to it.
This made $14 million
against a $2.5 million budget.
Yeah, I mean that's You could say that is
someone
a success.
paid $2.5 million for that.
Yeah. This movie has a cult following, and I can understand why. Also, like, this is super weird, too. So, John Carpenter likes to insert TV segments into his films that he produces. So, the first one has The Thing, which I thought was cool because he ended up making a remake to that film.
Mm-hmm.
Second one has Night of the Living Dead. I'm not really sure what the hint of that is. I guess maybe he's like just a fan of Night of the Living Dead, or maybe he's a fan.
I don't know if
he's
there's
just
any
like
significance between the two of those, but
or maybe he's just like a friend of George A. Romero. I have no idea. The third one, this is cool. This is like really cool. So this movie takes place outside the universe of Halloween 1 and 2, which means Halloween 1 and 2 are movies in Halloween 3. They are being advertised throughout the movie. The first one is even being shown on TV. So they're just movies in the third Halloween movie, which is so confusing.
When the doctor is like, he's captured and he's going to be put through that procedure where they put the mask on his head and it's going to, make bugs come out of his eyes or whatever. They do show Halloween on the television, the original Halloween, and you see glimpses of Laurie Strode on the TV.
Yeah.
And isn't it just, it's tragically hilarious when the best part of your movie is when it references a different, better movie. I thought that was the only good part of that whole thing.
This movie's insane.
This movie is ridiculous.
I love how weird it is, but there are just a couple things that keep me from saying that this is good. Obviously, the acting is bad.
Eric Andre and Tom Green would have made a better movie than this. and that is...
Yeah, the first and middle really drags along because it's trying to build the anticipation of, like, what is actually going on here at this facility. I will admit the ending is probably, like, the best part because that's when you realize, like, oh, okay, so this is what this is. But at the same time, there doesn't seem to be really a payoff, really, and the movie just kind of ends. I think, this is pretty much why this film has a cult following, because number one, it is the first Halloween film to not have Michael Myers. This was their first attempt to make an anthology film, and because this movie received negative reviews, they stepped back from that idea, and then they put Michael Myers back into the other films. Now, I would have liked to maybe have seen where this franchise would have gone. I think they could have made better movies, but they were so scared after this film that they decided to go back to its original roots. And I can't say whether that's good or bad or not. I mean, that's just basically me saying, like, what could have been in an alternate reality. But I think it maybe would have been interesting as, like, a television show. Because I know Friday the 13th did, like, a television show thing like that. Or
the whole thing feels like some sort of awful fan fiction that's just been, given money to... It's like something you'd see on IFC in the middle of the night.
It's an interesting concept, but it's just very not done well.
Yeah. The pieces to make this film really shine, I feel like were there, just lacking in execution, lacking in plot. The ideas themselves were sound. You have creepy town, you have creepy rituals, you have creepy corporation, and you just can't fire on any of those things to just make any of those work with each other. And you have, B-list actors, a C or D-list plot of basically alien technology from Stonehenge, and it's just not good. It just doesn't work.
This is definitely more of a sci-fi film than a Halloween film. I think that's the main thing that's up.
I agree.
I will give the movie credit. They try to do something different, but I don't know. So that's our thoughts on Halloween 3. Yeah. Steven hated it. Right, Steven? I'm sorry I made you watch that. You want to watch Halloween 4?
Anything. Anything to get the taste out of my mouth.
I can't wait for Halloween 4 because that's actually the attraction at Halloween Horror Nights this year. So, and I think that was my first film with like Michael Myers. So I'm excited to rewatch Halloween 4. I think it's gonna be great. So yeah, guys, that was our thoughts on Halloween 3. Comment down below what you think of the film. I'm interested to like hear your guys' thoughts. If you have seen Halloween 3, I really want to know like what you guys think of this film. Like this video, share it, and please subscribe to Pixel Talk if you haven't yet for more movie reviews, game reviews, and etc. Thank you guys so much. I am Corbin Stuckey. You are so disappointed.
I'm done.
And this is Pixel Talk.
He wasn't in it, so he doesn't need to be here.